What would you do if you had to choose between your dream career and the most important person in your life? How much is a promise made in your most vulnerable moment worth? And what if I told you that sometimes losing everything is the only way to find out who you really are? This is the story of architect Marcus Thompson, a man who discovered that life's greatest projects don't appear on architectural blueprints. Marcus Thompson always knew he would be an architect. As a child, he spent hours building perfectly symmetrical sandcastles while other kids played tag. At 8, he was already drawing floor plans of imaginary houses with precision that amazed his teachers. By 15, he had visited every architectural landmark in Chicago, his hometown, memorizing each structural detail like poetry. He graduated magna cum laude from Northwestern University and quickly established himself as one of the most promising young talents at one of Chicago's largest architectural firms. Specializing in large-scale commercial projects, Marcus traveled constantly. Singapore on Monday, Dubai on Thursday, London on the weekend. His life was a collection of luxury hotels, conference room meetings with stunning urban skyline views, and the constant hum of airplane engines. It was a life he loved until he met Sarah. Sarah was a freelance journalist, passionate about the human stories behind great constructions. They met during an interview about the new residential complex Marcus was designing in downtown Chicago. What should have been a 30-minute professional conversation turned into a 4-hour dinner, then into a dawn of conversations, then into a shared life. They married 2 years later in an intimate ceremony at Lincoln Park, with their hands intertwined under a pavilion Marcus had designed especially for the occasion. Sarah joked that he was capable of designing even love itself. For 3 years, they managed to balance their careers and relationship. Sarah accompanied Marcus on some trips, writing articles about international architecture. They were the golden couple of Chicago's professional world, appearing in specialized magazines, lecturing together about the intersection between journalism and urban architecture. Then Emma arrived. The pregnancy wasn't planned, but it was welcomed with joy. Marcus began mentally designing the perfect room for his daughter before the first ultrasound. They bought a house in Oak Park, with large windows and a garden where Emma could play. Marcus talked about reducing travel, about more local projects, about being present. But Emma decided to arrive 6 weeks early. Marcus was in Tokyo when he got the call. Sarah had gone into premature labor. He rushed to the airport, but all flights were booked. He spent 16 desperate hours in airports changing connections, negotiating with staff, offering money for any available seat. When he finally arrived at Prentice Women's Hospital in Chicago, Emma had already been born. 3 pounds and 2 ounces of pure determination, breathing with the help of machines in the NICU. Sarah was exhausted, but her eyes sparkled with relief when she saw him. "She waited for you," Sarah whispered, holding his hand. She kept asking the nurses if Daddy had arrived yet. Marcus looked at his daughter through the incubator glass and made a silent promise that would change his life forever. Emma spent 4 weeks in the NICU. Marcus cancelled all international projects, took leave from the office, and practically lived at the hospital. He learned to change tiny diapers, to recognize every sound from the monitors, to interpret every expression on his daughter's little face. It was during one of those lonely nights at the hospital, watching Emma sleep, that Marcus had an epiphany. Not about architecture, not about buildings or urban spaces, but about time. Time was the only construction material that, once used, could never be recovered. The day Emma finally went home, Marcus made the most difficult decision of his career. He quit. His boss, Richard Westbrook, a man who had been both mentor and professional father figure, couldn't understand. Marcus, you're throwing away 15 years of career. This company has invested in you. We have billion-dollar projects waiting for your signature. You can hire the best nanny in Chicago, take Sarah and the baby on trips. We'll find a solution. But Marcus had already found his solution. He opened his own office, focused on local residential projects, house renovations, small additions, landscaping projects. Revenue dropped drastically, but he was home for Emma's first smile, for her first words, for her first wobbling steps through the garden he had designed. For 2 years, they managed to maintain their standard of living. The residential projects, though smaller, were steady. Marcus discovered a different satisfaction in designing intimate spaces, in personally knowing every family he worked for, in seeing the direct impact of his work on people's daily lives. Emma was growing fast and smart. At 2, she already showed signs of her father's spatial aptitude, building elaborate towers with blocks, organizing her toys in complex geometric patterns. Then came 2008. The housing crisis hit the construction market like a tsunami. Overnight, all projects were cancelled. People stopped renovating houses, stopped dreaming of additions, stopped investing in landscaping. Marcus's office, which depended exclusively on the local residential market, was one of the first to feel the impact. In 6 months, Marcus went from a portfolio full of projects to 0 clients. The savings they had accumulated during the golden years began to evaporate. First, they cut small expenses, then the bigger ones. They cancelled premium health insurance, traded their car for a used model, started buying generic brands at the supermarket. Sarah returned to full-time journalism, accepting any available freelance work, articles about gardening for women's magazines, restaurant reviews for local newspapers, even some copywriting work for tech companies. She worked late into the night while Marcus took care of Emma, sending resumes to any job remotely related to architecture. The first interview was humiliating. Marcus, who had designed skyscrapers, applied for a junior position at a small firm. The interviewer, a man 10 years younger, leafed through his resume with disdain. "I see you had your own company. Why do you want to work for us? And this gap of almost 3 years, what exactly were you doing?" Marcus tried to explain about Emma, about the conscious choice to prioritize family, about the crisis that closed his office. But he saw in the interviewer's eyes what would become a pattern: distrust. Former business owners were seen as risks. People who had been out of the corporate market for years were considered outdated. There were 16 interviews in 2 months, some for positions well below his qualifications, others for companies that clearly didn't have the budget to hire anyone, but maintained the selection process to appear like they were growing. The 17th interview was different, a medium-sized firm specializing in commercial projects for small businesses. The founding partner, William Chen, had researched Marcus's previous work and was impressed. "Look, I know it's a junior position and the salary isn't what you deserve, but I need someone with real experience to mentor our young team. If it works out, there's room for rapid growth." Marcus accepted immediately. The salary was less than half what he earned in the golden days, but it was work, it was dignity, it was a fresh start. For 8 months, Marcus dedicated himself like never before. He arrived early, left late, took on projects that other architects considered impossible or unprofitable. He completely redesigned the company's project approval process, created a client management system that increased satisfaction by 40%, mentored 3 junior architects who became some of the firm's best professionals. Emma, now 4 years old, always asked when Daddy was coming home from work. Marcus promised that soon they would have more time together, that this phase was temporary, that everything would return to normal soon. In December, the company landed the biggest contract in its history, a $20 million office complex. Marcus had led the proposal, worked 60 hours a week for 2 months to create an impeccable presentation. The office celebration lasted until late hours. The following Monday, William Chen called him for a private meeting. "Marcus, you did incredible work on this project. Without you, we never would have gotten this contract." A long pause. "But we're going to have to let you go." Marcus felt the world stop. I don't understand. The project was approved. The company is celebrating the biggest contract in its history." "Exactly. And now we need architects who specialize in large commercial projects. You spent years working on residential houses. Your previous experience is impressive, but that was a long time ago. For this project, we need people who are at the forefront of contemporary commercial architecture." It was cruel logic, but business-wise sound. Marcus had been hired to land the project, not to execute it. His experience in sales and client relationships was valuable, but his technical expertise was seen as outdated. 2 weeks before Christmas, Marcus was unemployed again. This time, the job search was even more difficult. The economy was still recovering from the crisis, but the architecture market remained saturated. There were many experienced professionals competing for few positions, and Marcus now carried the stigma of having been fired twice in 3 years. Sarah took on more freelance work, but journalism was also undergoing a radical transformation. Newspapers were closing, magazines cutting budgets, and payment per article was getting smaller and smaller. She worked twice as much to earn half as much. In March, they received their first eviction notice. Marcus remembers exactly where he was when Sarah showed him the letter. Emma was in the garden, building a little house with branches and leaves, humming a song she had learned at preschool. The contrast between her innocence and the brutal reality of the situation was like a punch to the stomach. "We have 60 days, Sarah said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Maybe we can negotiate 1 more month with the landlord, but..." Marcus looked at his daughter, then at the house they had bought full of dreams, then at the architectural plans that still decorated the walls of his home office. For a moment, he considered calling Richard Westbrook, begging for his old position, accepting any conditions. But then he remembered the promise he had made in the hospital, watching Emma in the incubator. "I'll find a solution," he said, not knowing exactly how. The solution came from an unexpected place: his daughter. Emma, now 5 years old, had become obsessed with YouTube videos. Particularly, she loved watching people build things, from elaborate sandcastles to detailed dollhouses. Marcus often sat with her, explaining the architectural principles behind the constructions they watched. "Daddy, why don't you make videos too? You build the most beautiful things." It was an innocent suggestion from a child, but it planted a seed in Marcus's mind. That night, after Emma fell asleep, Marcus researched content creation on YouTube. He discovered a whole world of makers, builders, DIYers who had turned their hobbies into lucrative careers. Some were making more money from videos than he had ever earned as an architect. But Marcus knew nothing about filming, editing, digital marketing. At 42, he felt completely lost in the online world. Sarah, with her experience in digital journalism, got excited about the idea. "You have unique knowledge, Marcus. How many licensed architects are creating educational content online? You could teach design principles, construction techniques, architectural history. YouTube is full of people doing things, but few explaining why they do it that way." With $300 borrowed from Sarah's brother, Marcus bought a used camera and started filming in his own backyard. The first video was a technical disaster. Bad audio, shaky footage, amateur editing. Marcus explained how to build a simple deck, but spoke as if he were giving an academic lecture. Formal, technical, completely disconnected from YouTube's casual language. The video had 17 views in a week. 15 were from him and Sarah. Marcus wanted to give up, but Emma insisted on watching Daddy's video every day. "It's my favorite," she would say, clapping when he appeared on screen. The second video was slightly better. Marcus tried to be more conversational, included some jokes about common construction mistakes. It got 53 views. Encouraged, he posted a third video about basic interior design principles using only materials that cost less than $20. This video exploded. In 2 weeks, it had over 10,000 views. The comments were enthusiastic, people thanking him for practical tips, other architects praising the didactic approach, DIYers asking for more tutorials on budget-friendly projects. Marcus realized he had found a niche, accessible architecture for ordinary people. His next videos focused on transforming small spaces with minimal budgets, teaching design principles that anyone could apply, demystifying architectural concepts through practical projects. He filmed in his own house, using Emma as an occasional assistant, creating projects that were simultaneously educational and executable for families with limited resources. The growth was exponential. In 6 months, he had 100,000 subscribers. In a year, 500,000. The views generated advertising revenue, but more importantly, partnership opportunities with construction material companies began to arrive. Speaking invitations, even offers to write books. Marcus remembers the exact moment he realized he had found his new career. Emma, now 6 years old, was helping him film a video about how to build an architecturally accurate dollhouse. She held the camera with small but steady hands, asking intelligent questions about proportions and foundations. "Daddy," she said during a filming break, "you're building again, but now you're building knowledge in people's heads." Marcus looked at his daughter, then at Sarah, editing videos on the kitchen computer, then at the house they had managed to keep thanks to video revenue. For 5 years, he had felt like a professional failure, a man who had wasted his education and talent to become an amateur YouTuber. But Emma was right. He was building. He was building a community of people interested in design and construction. He was building educational content that democratized architectural knowledge. He was building a new way to support his family, doing what he loved. Most importantly, he was building daily memories with his daughter. Today, 3 years later, Marcus's channel has over 2 million subscribers. He has published 2 books on accessible design, partnered with major construction material chains, and developed a line of basic tools for beginning DIYers. His annual revenue exceeds what he earned as a corporate architect, but the real profit lies in the tens of thousands of comments from people who have transformed their homes and lives using his teachings. Emma, now 9 years old, occasionally appears in videos as a junior consultant. She inherited her father's eye for proportions and already designs her own dollhouses with detailed floor plans. She casually talks about focal points and traffic flow, like other children talk about cartoon characters. Sarah left freelance journalism to become the channel's executive producer, managing partnerships and developing new content formats. They worked together from home, in an office that Marcus designed specifically for filming, with perfect natural lighting and optimized acoustics. But the real plot twist of the story happened 6 months ago. Richard Westbrook, his former boss from the architecture firm, got in touch. The company was developing a new division focused on experiential architecture, spaces that tell stories and create emotional connections. They wanted Marcus to lead the project. "You've become Chicago's most influential architect," Richard said during the meeting. "Not because you designed the tallest or most expensive buildings, but because you taught half the world to think like an architect. We want to bring that perspective to our corporate projects." The offer was tempting. High salary, creative autonomy, the chance to return to the world of traditional architecture with the prestige and influence he had built online. Marcus asked for a week to decide. The night before the deadline, Emma found him in the office, looking at architectural plans for the first time in years. "Are you going to travel again, Daddy?" The question was asked with the curious neutrality of children, without drama or manipulation, but it cut straight to the heart of the matter. Marcus looked at his daughter, then at the office where they had filmed hundreds of videos, then at the window where he could see Sarah in the garden, testing a vertical garden project for the next video. "No," he said, "I'm going to keep building right here." The next day, he called Richard and respectfully declined the offer. But he proposed something different, a partnership where he would create educational content for the firm, keeping his home base, developing projects that would combine traditional architecture with digital engagement. The proposal was accepted. Today, Marcus works as a creative consultant for 3 of Chicago's largest architecture firms, maintains his YouTube channel, and has developed an online course on architectural principles for everyone that has already been completed by over 50,000 students. Most importantly, he never missed one of Emma's school recitals, never stopped reading to her before bed, never had to choose between a work call and a conversation with his daughter. Marcus's story isn't about a man who gave up his dreams for his family. It's about a man who discovered that his dreams were smaller than he had imagined. It's about understanding that success isn't measured only in square feet, built, or zeros in the bank account, but in lives touched, knowledge shared, and time well invested. It's about realizing that sometimes you need to lose everything to find what really matters. And discovering that life's greatest projects are those you build one day at a time, with the people you love most, creating structures made not of concrete and steel, but of memories, laughter, and moments that no economic crisis can tear down. Today, when Marcus looks out the window of his home office, he sees Emma in the garden designing sandcastles with the same geometric precision he had at her age. But unlike his solitary childhood castles, hers always have extra space. "Who else is going to live here?" he asked once. "The whole family," she replied, as if it were obvious. "Castles are more fun when everyone fits inside." Marcus smiled, understanding that he had taught his daughter architecture's most important lesson. The best projects always start with love and end with space for everyone who matters. If this story touched you, if you believe it's possible to rebuild your life even when everything seems lost, subscribe to our channel for more real stories of overcoming and transformation. Because everyone deserves a second chance to build the life of their dreams. Like our video, and see you tomorrow.